Everything I know comes from what this man on this episode has created. This podcast came from what this man has created. Hamilton Souther, we can call him a world influencer. Whether you've heard of him or not, it doesn't matter. This man has influenced creation, innovation, a way of thought, a way of healing. He is a gringo who helped bring ayahuasca to the Western world because natives trusted him, because he took a leap of faith on a whim. At a young age, went to the jungle ready to learn. This episode was a long time coming. It didn't come easy. I had to earn this episode through hard work, grit, and understanding. Hamilton Souther, I wasn't sure to think of him. All I ever heard was hearsay, and it was always good because we had 2 degrees of separation. I'm good friends with people he's good friends with. Our friends Eddie and Cheryl Gonzalez, Cheryl Gorham, out in California. We go stay out with them in February every year, and Eddie and Hamilton have known each other prior to Hamilton founding Blue Morpho. They rode dirt bikes together, and you'll hear some stories within this podcast, some injuries that Hamilton has suffered, which kind of put him out of commission for a while. We got into some tough stuff in this episode because this is not a game of easy peasy. Shamanism is the toughest work any heroic human being could take on. Imagine taking on an existence, a new cloak, a new way of life where your only purpose is to heal others, all the while digging through the depths of yourself. Not everyone is cut out for that. We lost someone who many of us, thousands of us, thought was cut out for that. We lost him. And it was under weird circumstances. We didn't understand what happened to Mel. And this episode, about 20 minutes in, sheds light on what happened, what really happened. So hopefully some of the lack of understanding can be put to rest by this episode. I kind of went into it figuring we would talk about it. But we definitely touched in on it, and we got so much insight from Hamilton. If you've ever heard him on past podcasts, I think he's been on Psychedelic Milk. He's been on with Corey Allen. He has been on with Aubrey Marcus. And this one was different compared to those other ones. Hamilton and I had a precast where we were talking, and I told him I didn't want to go down his regular journey. That story where he tells people how he ended up in the jungle and what it took. And no, we wanted to go outside of the box. And I think that's why people value this podcast is, yes, I come in with somewhat of a macro blueprint of what we're going to talk about. But, you know, throughout the process, questions come to mind and they're fit for the moment. So I cannot thank Hamilton enough. I cannot thank Terry enough for linking us up and setting it up. I cannot thank the Blue Morpho family enough. Blue Morpho has changed my life. Blue Morpho brought me everything I have today. It brought a stationary astronaut because of a mat in a maloca in the middle of the Amazon jungle, where I came to the conclusion that I'm down here, but I'm up there. Stationary astronaut. If I go deep within myself, I am able to reach the stars. So with that being said, thank you to Blue Morpho. Thank you to Hamilton Souther. Enjoy the show.
I'm gonna be high as a fucking man.
And now, the Stationary Astronaut.
All right, Hamilton Souther, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm good. The founder of Blue Morpho, I finally get to talk to you.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, I founded Blue Morpho many years ago. It's been a real pleasure and quite a journey.
Now, it's crazy where I get to finally put a face behind everything I've experienced and the connections you have blessed me with, because I've been down to Blue Morpho a couple times, and you guys now have a new camp.
Yeah, I mean, we're back at the lodge where we started from 2005. We were at another location for a period of time, and we decided to come back to really our home and start again from here. And it's been really incredible. It's been an incredible journey, especially since last October and the tours that I started to be on again.
Now, I bring up new camp because you guys went in there with some brand new construction, correct?
Yeah, we decided that it was time to really make this, our serious lodge. And so we've started work on a series of changes to the lodge. We're remodeling the bungalows. We've added a swimming pool. We've added a lounge area, Wi-Fi area. We've brought in electricity, and we're doing some electrical work now, putting in ceiling fans and some dimmable lights. And then also in the process of building a new ceremonial house, which should be about 3 times the size of our current one.
What? Comparable to Heliconia, how big is it?
About 1.5 times the size of Heliconia's. So for the listeners, we're talking probably 6,000 to 7,000 square feet roundhouse.
Because we could fit 50 people in Heliconia's comfortably.
Yeah, I'm looking to fit 70 to 75, maybe 80 with all of us. Yeah, it's time to take it to another level and have amazing ceremonies. And we've started this project around sustainable food development that goes right alongside the idea of sustainable medicine practices. And so I wanted to create an opportunity for more people to be able to come meet us and to create a space that we could have obviously much larger groups, but also a different price structure. Mm-hmm. Over the years, the business side of Blue Morpho required, especially with inflation here in Peru, the increasing of prices to match costs. And I wanted to find a way to try to lower that. And so when I came back and started managing Blue Morpho again, I really looked at how we could try to find savings and pass those on to our guests. And ultimately, we're going to have the ability for people to come at a much cheaper price. This year, we've lowered prices. And then by next year, we should have a whole nother price tier for people who will come and also volunteer and help us in the growth of this sustainable food development. We consider it a green mission, something super important for the future, absolutely necessary for the growing third world economies and their growing populations. And so we're really looking forward to being able to invite us to come now on each tour, obviously for a reduced price, and then to be able to help us in the development of that project.
Now, this sustainability mission, is that kind of what really brought you back down to the jungle to start, working hands-on with the people again?
Yeah, I mean, there were really 2 reasons. One was I had a severe motorcycle accident in 2010, and in that accident, I broke my hip and dislocated the right femur, and was really handicapped for a number of years after that, to the point that it was very hard for me to sit in a chair. I couldn't really sit in an ayahuasca ceremony, for 4 to 6 hours in a chair. So I spent a lot of time in rehabilitation, and then for one more time around that merry-go-round, I ended up, after being rehabilitated, having an accident again and breaking most of my ribs on the left-hand side. And so after both of those injuries, it took me a while to rehab enough to be able to come back. And so part of it was rehabbing to that point. And then during that time, that gave me a lot of time to be on the floor thinking. I spent a lot of time on the floor doing practices to rehabilitate, and it got me thinking about the future, not just medicine practices, but also overall sustainability and what that meant to a much larger agenda. And I was researching more stats on that for many years. I was just focused on medicine practices and the people that we were helping. And I started to get this idea that if the collective group was not also opening up to changing the approach to the way we were treating the environment, there wasn't going to be an environment in which for us to have medicine practices. Mm-hmm. So it started to seem pretty crazy or even nonsensical to think about healing hundreds or thousands of people a year, only to have the whole collective end up creating a situation of, a disaster. And so I thought, okay, well, we need to expand our agenda to this larger sustainable mission and branch out and share that network with others and NGOs and governments, third world governments, and really expand this idea of how we could utilize secondary forests and utilize the land masses in these areas for sustainable food development. And so once we got the project going to a level that it was time to implement it, it turned out that I could come back all at the same time. The health, the personal crises with the accidents, and then the ability to be back in ceremony, and also having the project to the point of launching it and bringing it to the public was all kind of coinciding again synchronistically. And that's what brought me back.
I think it's important that we tell Big Eddie Gonzalez to quit trying to get you onto motorcycles from here on out.
Yeah, I think he tries. He tries to get us on motorcycles for sure. But I've given that up. I've realized that my motocross career is finally over. And I turned 40. And whatever was the extreme athlete in me left somewhere in that transition from 37 to 40 in the accident. I just have like the need for extreme everything, including extreme ayahuasca, kind of all turned into this idea of a more holistic life vision and a holistic view of what we were doing as a collective group and as a company and as a business. And so I agree that unfortunately the motorcycles, even though it's a deep passion of mine, have to stay away. And it's more important to maintain health and the physical well-being and now stay focused on our medicine practices again.
Now, beyond what you're doing at the retreat center and with Blue Morpho, how do you plan on going about kind of, helping save the lungs of our planet in the Amazon jungle?
Well, we started this project called One Energy Global, we being a think tank and business team that I put together through like-minded people that had come to Blue Morpho. Mm-hmm. And the goal of One Energy Global, it's a blockchain platform. It's to create a space for people who are green thinkers to come together and share in the ideas and ultimately create for-profit ways to be able to sustain the land. And so what we saw was that there was a tremendous amount of secondary forest in the last 20 years. The predation on the tropical forests around the world have been severe. And what's left behind is land and plants and huge forests, but they don't have what would be considered traditional forest wealth in them anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, it's not hardwoods and oil and things like that. Those have all been extracted out of the forest. And now it's where people have cleared it. And now it's grown back. And it's not the same ecology as a primary forest. And so our goal was to focus our attention on those secondary forests as a place to be able to create economic incentive. And then, like I say, sustainable food development through the use of those lands. So we focused our innovative ideas on how to reimagine those parts of the forest and how we could find a way to extract value. I think the hardest part in green and green thinking is that without it being profitable, it's almost impossible to get large-scale backing for it. And so to bring the green agenda and then a for-profit motive is also really hard because the typical profit agenda isn't green. And so to try to work all of those intricacies out was a pursuit over a couple of years that our business team looked at. And we finally came to, like I say, to some proprietary ideas that would give us this ability to start to transform the land and transform these forests that had already been degraded and already been interrupted by humans and their use of them, and then give them new value. And that's where we are now. We're looking in the next months to launch the first pieces of land. And I'm out here now on our land at the lodge, creating the changes to make that possible.
How do you feel about working again with Maestro Alberto, your sidekick? Does it just give you the jitters every single day?
It's incredible. When I met Alberto, it was a dream come true. I found a real medicine man. I found somebody who was, for me, from movies, right? There were only movie characters that kind of had this quality of capacities that he and Julio had. And I was looking for that, And so you could go to like Star Wars themes or Lord of the Rings, themes, or any movie that has to do with the idea of beyond just the scientific concepts and agreed concepts of reality. And so to meet Maestro Alberto was unbelievable. And then to get to study with him was, even beyond unbelievable. And then to get to come back, I mean, it's mind blowing because I never really had a vision of the true future of Blue Morpho. I knew that we were building this medicine center, and I knew that the goal was to help as many people as we could and to share with them the beauties of ayahuasca medicine and the different plants of this forest. But I didn't really know where that would take us, you know? And so to come from on such a journey over 16 years and be side by side, shoulder to shoulder in ceremony again is unbelievable joy. I mean, I've always said it's an honor to be in that role. I think it's an honor that anyone would listen to anybody else or share in their ideas. And then to be in a medicine space with so many people is just even a greater honor. I mean, when we're in there together and the medicine is really strong and, you know, people are having eye-open visions everywhere and they all, you know, call it 5D, rainbow reality, total visionary space, you know, these extraordinary experiences that people normally don't have. To get to facilitate that with Alberto is, you know, better than a dream. It really is. It's fundamentally amazing. And the quality of his practice has, you know, I think only grown over the years. He's just so profound in ayahuasca shamanism and his capacities in managing a ceremony. And it still blows my mind. Every ceremony, he'll be in the space of the visions and of the spirit, already helping the person before they're asking. Right before I see they need it, he's already there. Yep. Without even getting up from his chair. And then the next day, the report is that he just came to them and helped them. And I was able to see it, and the speed and quality and understanding that he has of that space. I mean, he has merited through an unbelievable amount of practice. How many people in this world have studied from before the age of 10 and now is over 60 and has drunk ayahuasca thousands and thousands of times, well over 4,000 or 5,000 times in his life. So, you know, it's just an unbelievable amount of experience and incredible joy, just incredible joy to sit with him. And it's an honor. I mean, it's an honor to sit with him every time. To get to listen to his icaros and be in ayahuasca and share that with others is just fundamentally amazing.
Working with him is truly magical, and feeling just his presence, let alone kind of what you're talking about, where there's this telepathic connection he shares with you in the room and how he kind of goes about his practice. It just forces you to give him a hug every single time you see him, just because of what he's able to do for a singular person, let alone an entire collective.
Absolutely. And he's been so generous in the medicine. I think one thing that isn't really shared a lot is that it was really taboo in his culture to share the medicine with foreigners. It was not considered okay or appropriate. And, he and Julio stepped outside of that taboo and decided to open up and accept us. And I came with real desires. I wasn't faking it. I really wanted to learn. I was unbelievably fascinated by what they had studied and learned over the years and what their indigenous knowledge was. But it wasn't common to share that. It was okay to share ceremonies with people, but to actually teach them and to take them into the realm of the shaman and to take them into that visionary space and then openly share the medicine at that level with people that weren't from the local culture really was taboo. And I think it shows an incredible amount of his character, and credit to him that he was willing to do that and see that it was going to be important for him and also for us in our lifetime to do that together. And I, forever grateful. And I think that that's one of the real hallmarks of Julio and his existence is both were to open that whole space up. And then, the ramifications of that and the influence that has had on now thousands of people, and then the connections that has impacted in their lives because of the willingness to do that, really touches a huge amount of the planet. And I think that that's a tremendous gift that he gave all of us.
Is he truly aware of kind of the darkness and what's really going on in the United States right now?
I don't know. I think he's just aware of darkness in general. I don't think he puts a geographic location to it. Mm-hmm. He thinks that the people are really sick. Mm-hmm. He thinks that illness is spreading, and, that he doesn't have exactly an explanation for it, but he just sees it as a form of darkness and as a form of predation, I would say. It's always very simple with him. It's always, is it light or is it dark? Mm-hmm. Is it good for the environment or is it bad for the plants? Is it good for the animals or is it bad for them? It's really simple. And and there's very little comparison in that. And so I think he's just, pretty impacted by the idea that so many people from all over the world that have come to see us represent a small subset of the population, but a selected part of that population representing a much greater population that has these issues, these illnesses, these problems, and these experiences of darkness in their psyche and in their soul, and, trying to liberate themselves from that. And I think his, focus has always been 100% the medicine itself. So he's been sharing that idea with as many people as possible to turn to the medicine, to turn to the light, to turn to love, to turn to the heart, to turn to his understandings of divinity and infinity and the universe, and to see through these, obstacles or delusions that people have. He tells me stories all the time of individuals. So he tells me of a group that thought God was money. Mm-hmm. And how he showed them what his understanding of God was, and how the next day they agreed that God was not money anymore. Mm-hmm. And he talks about others that, thought that sort of they were just the pure state of ego. They were just the wholeness of their ego, and that's all there was. There is no spirit. There is nothing beyond us. And then their experiences of how he showed them how the whole jungle was alive. And then he likes to throw in how they usually purge top and bottom, and how to really intense talk, take it all in, He likes a little bit. Ayahuasca experience, and if you haven't, come have it, But he has that vibe of telling those stories about how he awakened those people to those understandings, and I think that is key to his understanding of the rest of the world.
With so much time spent between you and Alberto, do you guys communicate between each other's dreams ever?
Yeah, we dream each other often, typically in times of need. When you have a telepathic communication with somebody and it's been there for a very long time, it's kind of like calling them on the phone. You don't interrupt them if you don't have to, typically. I mean, when I was in training, Julio and Alberto used to mess with me all the time just to prove it, especially when I was doubting. So I could be halfway around the world in a restaurant, and they would just crush me, and all of a sudden I would be seeing ayahuasca visions trying to eat pizza or something, and have to walk outside and tune into them and be like, what do you guys want? What's up? And they'd be like, ha ha ha, we're just saying hi, And then I'd come home and see them, and they'd be like, you were in the pizza restaurant and we were coming and messing with you, And so after a while, you start to really respect each other in that space. And when we need of each other, we definitely call on each other and we dream each other. But we can also call each other just from normal waking state. If we go into a trance or into concentration, we can contact each other. And, I remember the first day that Julio and Alberto took me into that state. That was when they agreed to teach me. That night that they actually got together, they never told me that they had this meeting. I found out about it when a documentary was being filmed on us, and Alberto shared the story. But that night, which was in, 2003, 2002, 2003, deep in the forest together, sitting there together, they had finally agreed to teach me, and they took me in this ayahuasca vision to this point that was just first utter light and rainbows, and then a tunnel of white that ended in death, and then absolute black. And instead of dying, the lights turned back on inside me. I mean, it was terrifying and also unbelievably uncomfortable. But when the lights turned on inside me, there was no actual physical death or even spiritual death. It felt like death to the point of just blacking out and then immediately on. Right? Like if you turned a light off and turned it on without that, not even a second passing, as fast as you could possibly do that. And when that happened, Alberto and Julio were in my head. They were literally in my mind. And it was the first time I had ever had multiple people in my mind at the same time and talking, and not me making it up. Not like me imagining my family talking to me or me imagining something. They're really talking to me. And so I thought, no, this can't be. So I thought to myself, Julio, I'd really like a cigarette. And he literally handed me a cigarette without saying anything. So I just thought it. Julio, I'd like a cigarette. He reaches into his pocket and he hands me a cigarette. And I went, oh my God, this is real. This is really happening. this is real. He's in my head. And then he starts laughing, ha, 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 physically, as I was thinking those things. And so I knew he was hearing me, and then it's just continued since then. I mean, that started my training with them. And now, over a decade later, there we are still experiencing that in ceremony together. And again, what a gift.
Now, this past November, we all lost a brother, one of my former maestros. We lost Malcolm. Did Maestro Alberto have anything to say prior to that regarding Malcolm's energy, where it was going, or did he have anything to say post after Malcolm passed? Has there been any conversation regarding it?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot. I think what hasn't really been told about Malcolm's story is that Malcolm asked to be relieved of all of his duties associated with us and ayahuasca almost a year before he passed away. So the entirety of 2018, he wasn't in the medicine practices with us. And that was his own desire, and he asked for that. And he had been asking me for a while for that. And we were looking for a way to reorganize because he held such a central role. And so we were really working together to make that possible. And finally, at the beginning of 2018, we had found the right managers who could come in and take over for him. And some of the other people who had been apprenticing and learning had grown up in the space enough so that Malcolm could step away. And we really thought that that was a movement that would be really positive for him and something needed for us as a business group and as a community. And, from that point on, we don't exactly know what happened with Malcolm, specifically, right? But we saw Malcolm start to have different kinds of emotional difficulties, and he had a really, by later in the year, a really negative view that he had taken on the rest of the world. From his travels around the world, he had traveled all over, and he had this really dystopian vibe about what the world had become and what it had done to the traditional peoples of the world and what the modern world was continuing to do. And we saw that Malcolm was entering into a pretty dark space, and we tried and offered to help him on multiple occasions, but he wasn't interested in coming back. I offered Mal at least 100 times to come drink with me, be in ceremony with me, purge, change, but he had made his decision. And I think the other thing about Mal that a lot of people don't know is that he was unbelievably insistent on maintaining his own decision, period. Mm-hmm. So he had his decision, and that ultimately expressed itself in taking his own life, which for us is just an unbelievable tragedy, an unbelievable loss, an unbelievable tragedy. But he insisted on that, and that really is, the mark of him as a shaman, that he never gave that up to anybody else. It was his decision. He carried it with him to the absolute end. Yep. Alberto's teaching is that you have to be decided. And so we were worried about Mal, and we were trying to work with them to, find resolution and peace and come to a really good place. But he wasn't, open to that at that period of time. And then afterwards, it's just been a continuous spiritual communication. We called him to ceremony. We've talked with them. We've, understood why he's made his decision in the way that we can as shamans, and we've come to peace with it. But it's, been a brutal and, tough trajectory in that sense. I mean, it lost a brother, lost a friend, lost a business partner, co-shaman, co-maestro, and something that we had, not really foreseen as something that was going to come at that moment to that decision and those actions. And so it was a real big shock to us.
Someone who had helped so many people, including myself. I'll never forget my fifth night of ceremony, my second year with you guys. It was a tough week for me. I battled. What am I thinking? This is my first year, fifth night. And I had a tough week. I battled. And sure enough, all it took was him coming and just tugging on my big toe, pulling that last bit of negative energy out of me, sent me home higher than a kite, just lit up. And it was someone who could always kind of see through me with his stoicism. He was a very stoic individual, someone who was prideful and like you were saying, his decision was made. And he was a very strong-willed individual. And I remember when he said that he had reached a place where his energy cannot rebound, I knew right there, because what Mal would say is bond, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. He complained to me about being extremely tired, that he felt, incredibly burned out. And I also think, sometimes for shamans, the hardest thing to do is to be able to receive their own medicine. It's easy to give it once you learn how, but sometimes it's really hard to be able to receive those lessons yourself. And the further you get into the practice, the harder it is to weed out the next lessons. At first, it's really easy. You just go into an ayahuasca ceremony and you have your whole life to purge. Mm-hmm. 1,000 ceremonies into the game, you've purged 1,000 ceremonies. Now what's left? And you're looking and you're digging and you're finding stuff that's been holding on the whole time. Mm-hmm. And it is true that in the Amazon, lots of shamans don't make it. It's not that ayahuasca shamanism is just a medicine form that for the shamans is easy or, really that survivable. In fact, I think most shamans don't make it until, late into the ages like Julio, into the late 80s or early 90s. I think most of them perish much younger than that. And it's part of the nature of the volatility of the ayahuasca space and the intensity of that space. And to survive it for a long time is, incredibly difficult. And so I think that that's also important for people to know that, receiving all of the lessons is not easy. And the shamans are in a position where they have an incredible amount of inner strength that they've developed. And they have to get past that to be able to be open to those next set of lessons. And in the case of Mal, Mal took his decision with him to the grave. And that's a decision that we can't judge. It's his decision. And like I say, we as shamans don't believe in taking that decision away from somebody, although we do consider it a tremendous tragedy and loss.
Is there the turnover with shamans, no matter how long it is that because of the darkness you're having to see in other people through ceremonies, or is that the darkness you discover within yourself?
There's both. I mean, there's really three main categories that you come up against. One is your own experience of your own consciousness that's isolated to your own ego and the process of processing that and dealing with it. The second is the groups and being in a continuous field. I always thought it was funny that, and like ironic funny, not funny, haha, but you do all this work to purge and cleanse yourself to become a master shaman. And then as soon as you do, literally just 5-10 feet away are people purging all of that stuff onto you. So you didn't get it very far, right? You got it out of your own body, and now you're helping others, but it's all the same stuff. And so there it is again. It didn't really disappear from your life. And now it's not just yours in you with a shaman helping you. Now you're the shaman helping hundreds and hundreds of people a year. So you have hundreds of quantity of that at any given time. And then also in the world of the shamans is this collective shamanic tribal system that is still in existence today. It's part of the collective consciousness. It's part of mythological consciousness. And within it, there is the light and the dark. And that can come from anywhere. And it presents itself in different kinds of shamanic engagements and difficulties, battles, warriorship that happens. And different lineages have different interactions and difficulties with that at times. And in the case for us in the Amazon, since we were really a mixed race group of traditional people with, foreigners involved, there was a lot of antagonism to us. And you get bombarded with that. The people who are in the space who don't want you in the space try to remove you from the space. It's just like a massive multiplayer online video game where there are other people from all over that just don't want you in that game. Mm-hmm. And, so you're getting, in a sense, targeted and hit by all of this spirit energy, and that's coming in all different shapes and forms in the conscious, your own consciousness, the collective consciousness, the group consciousness. And so you have to be really vigilant and really careful with your energy. You have to be really continuously cleansing and continuously dieting, continuously practicing to be able to maintain that solidarity and withstand it, And there are in many lineages apprentices who perish. There are many shamans who die along the way. And it was not considered automatic that you would survive apprenticeship by Julio or Alberto. When I asked Julio if a white person could, if a foreign person could become an Amazonian shaman, he said, if you survive, first, if you can survive it, period. Well, that puts death right on the table. Mm-hmm. Death is now immediately on the table. It's if you can survive. Well, what do you mean if I can survive? It's not like going to a college and then just quitting. It's if you can survive this. And then he said to me, we all bleed red. Like, it's not the color of your skin. It's whether or not your blood's going to survive it for real, and you may perish. And it was unbelievably sketchy for me at that time to hear that in my early 20s from a guy in his 80s who had been living it his whole life. But it's the darker side of shamanism. It's the more intense side of shamanism. You hear a lot about just the medicine and the beauty and the light, but you get there by this incredible purge and ultimate mastery over these darker forces so that they don't keep you from the medicine. Like you're saying, Malcolm grabbing your big toe and having that last bit come out of you and then opening up to that space of light. When you've tasted the darkness inside those spaces and in your own consciousness, you know. And I think it's hard. It's not easy. It's really not easy. And the true practices are incredibly intense.
Through your work, could you kind of break down your understanding of karmic law?
Karmic law. I think karmic law is more self-created than externally created. I think it's really easy to externalize the idea of karmic law, that there's a greater force that's putting that karma on you. But I think if you look at the collective consciousness, the mythology in that consciousness, the light and the dark, the duality, the place where you have your freedom and then the place where you have that sort of super egoic compression over you, I think that's where the karma shows up. And that expression of karmic law is, I don't know, I think just fundamental to the idea of de facto fundamental reality, that this isn't a place to mince the argument or the concepts. Tree is tree, energy is energy. Scientists know energy as electrons and strong bonds. Shamans know energy and visions and vibe and feeling it. They're talking about the exact same thing. It takes a different shape and form in our consciousness. Our consciousness has been barely explored. The mind has only been aware of its own consciousness for an unbelievably short period of time in human history. And so I think karmic law gets externalized when really it's a completely internal experience and then ultimately shared amongst groups. It becomes part of the ideology, and then they hold you to it as well. So not only do you have it just in yourself, but then you end up finding that the other people bring the karma as well. And I think it's also a surrender to destiny. There's this difficulty and challenge to survival itself. It's not easy to be alive. You can tell a lot of stories about the struggle associated with that, but ultimately, we've all been born way beyond for a reason. The being birthed itself is axiomatic. Being of consciousness is of great importance, period. And human life is, as well as all life, I think fundamentally miraculous. I don't think there's a way to understand it beyond that. We have no notion of human life somewhere else other than Earth itself. And so, you look at galaxies and you look at outer space and you see these tremendous distances and you see these stars, and then there's the solar system and there's this Earth, and we are of this Earth. And, I think that is truly the essence of destiny. The fact that we were born and are living, the fact that we are of consciousness and self-aware, the fact that we're sharing ideas and part of the collective, the fact that all of our ancestors have already moved on, they've already lived and died, and that they've been more ancestors than people alive that have moved through that transition. I think that's really where we have to just surrender to the understanding that life has difficulties associated with it. The karma expresses itself in those difficulties. We move through that together. And ultimately, I hope that we can come to our own resolution. And I do see that as the path of destiny, or, the path of life itself.
That was a true Hamilton Souther answer right there.
Thank you.
How has your work shaped your understanding of the afterlife?
I just don't believe in it. I don't believe there's a
Ooh.
before or after life. I just don't. I believe
Just a
there is life.
just a during life?
It's just a during life, and life doesn't end in what we call death. I think of death as a birth. I think of a continuous series of births, not the culmination in a cycle to an end. And so, there was this guy called my father, and he did this action that's called intercourse or sex, and who knows how many times in his life there was a sperm that went somewhere else that wasn't me, and then all of a sudden I existed, I was born. And then I see that from all life comes life. So the jungle is constantly decomposing and rebirthing itself and decomposing and rebirthing itself. And I see that in that life for us, they go through these different stages of development. And I look at our position in this life and of this energy, and I don't see it as individualized or personalized. I see it as being of the earth itself. And so the earth birthed me, and so I just don't see why the earth would kill me. It just doesn't make sense to me. I see that as a mythological story. It's a way for us to culminate the notion of someone's end. We mentioned Malcolm and the idea of, perishing in the physical form, but the spirit continues and moves on. Julio has been, deceased for many, many years. He's still 100% part of our mesa. There's this continuance that isn't after what? There's a transition. Yes, there's this moment where life was one kind of thing. You're of this consciousness in this isolated way. I think you shed that isolation and you become part of a collective. And in that collective, the collective represents a we, and the we is something that we would know as spirit. And when we're as body, we experience it in I am, and it's all self-reflected. And for many people, incredibly scary, And so I think that shuts down our ability to see this continuous blossoming of life. And so I think when Earth is done, when we're done, in essence, with the body, what moves on is a continuance of life itself and consciousness itself. And I think that the isolation of the body is free. And I kind of think of the body, and I like to think of it in other terms than, just human. So I think there are these caterpillars that become butterflies. So maybe the body's like the caterpillar form, and what comes next is the butterfly. And in that meaning, to me, it's beyond Earth itself. It's a galactic, universal form, and something that I think is potentially exciting and not so scary.
Do you think that's why we're able to tap into past life recognition? Is it because it's just a seamless cycle, whether we egoically think of death the way we do?
Yes, I do. I think it is seamless. I think the notion of revolution and reincarnation is a way to try to understand that seamlessness. Mm-hmm. I see it as a field itself of life. Okay? And linguistically, we are fundamentally incredible at separating ourselves. But that's only in linguistics. So I can sit here and tell everybody how separate I am from the jungle around me, but it's fundamentally not true. I'm breathing the jungle around me. Oxygen's coming out of the leaves all around me. It's becoming me. I'm exhaling it to them. They're becoming it. We're all becoming it together. And so I don't see it as so isolated or individualistic like we represent so much in our linguistics. And I think ayahuasca is an incredible way, and the sacred plants are an incredible way for people to see beyond that veil. I never really felt like that veil was the whole truth. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a way to understand early on in my practice that it was a question of linguistics, but now I really do see it that way. It's a form of thought, and it's a form of the mind itself. And when you alter the nature of the mind with the plants and with the ceremonial experience, the intraweb of energy becomes visible. Mm-hmm. The what people call spirit becomes visible. The spirit of the plants and trees and insects all around us become visible. Mm-hmm. The experience in ceremony of the entire forest around us taking rhythms and syncopated rhythms to the shakapas themselves. At first, it all sounds like just sonic chaos. Mm-hmm. And then pretty soon in the ceremony, it's not just us. The forest joins in. And if you haven't had that experience, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's like a multi-species orchestra forms between everything. And then how those end up tying into our consciousness synchronicities and the realizations people have. You know, it's magical. It's beautiful. It's amazing. It's just every adjective you could put to it of fantastic. You know, how is that separate? I just don't see it that way. So I've had so many experiences and continuous, and we'll have them next week, and we'll have them, you know, the very next week, of how all of this is interconnected, that I just see that seamlessness of life, and that how we are, I don't know, continuously created. It's not even just reincarnated once, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It's literally more than we know how to count.
With all you've seen, does anything surprise you anymore?
I think the only thing that surprises me is why people are still so cruel. Like, there's so much cruelty that to me seems to not help anything. And that surprises me. It surprises me to maintain the nature of that cruelty, whether it's a family member to another family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a loved one, whether it's a romantic couple, whether it's a country to another country. It doesn't matter. It's just fundamental cruelty. And I've never understood why that's necessary. And it's surprising how strong that is as a response to life and a response to each other. You know, I think that people need to spend way more time in their imagination and outer space, and see that then there's only Earth. You can count it if you want. It's one Earth or it's Earth, and we're here within the Earth, and there's no more of us. And so why be cruel to each other? It just doesn't make any sense to me. And so that's surprising when I see it in different kinds of ways. And then I'm positively surprised when I get to learn anything new. You know, whenever I have an experience of learning something new, I'm always positively surprised, because it's literally new. You didn't know it before, and then all of a sudden it's there and it doesn't go away. The transference of that knowledge is available, and that's always a pleasant surprise. I recently got a new dog. I had 2 German Shepherds, and my last German Shepherd passed away in December, and I just got a new dog, and he's an amazing, amazing being, and he does things that blows my mind every day. The way he learns and the way that we work together it's not training him, it's working together. It's the way we work together for him to learn and for me to learn at the same time is just phenomenal. And that's surprising. In the moment when it happens, you know, the light lights up and you can see it. And that's been really, really amazing to form that bond and to have that connection with another, you know, being from another species, but that's super intelligent and capable. And that's also been, you know, awakening and really surprising.
How do you feel the impact of marijuana is having on the Western world? Because as some of us know, you and Christian were holding cannabis ceremonies at your place in Colorado. Did you kind of just throw that in the wind to come down to back down to Peru, or do you still plan on practicing cannabis ceremonies in the future?
Well, I certainly plan on doing cannabis ceremonies in the future. The question to me around the use of the plants is always around legality and being in a place where you can legally use the plants, simply because for me personally, and it doesn't have to be that way for somebody else, but if I'm going to be in a state that's psychoactive and, you know, quote unquote tripping, I want to be comfortable. I don't want in the back of my mind a little thought ghost saying, you know, this might not be okay, or you could get caught or something like that. And so I've never recommended to people, especially if they're novices, to enter into a space where you have any doubt about your well-being. You should be comfortable in the space that you're in. You need to know that the people that you're with are supporting you, that, you know, if it's a group of friends and your brothers have your back, if it's a group of shamans like us, you know, from our professionalism and years of practice, that we're there really for everyone's good. You know, to be in that space where you feel like you can really have that experience. In my case with cannabis, it started when I moved back to the United States after the motorcycle accident, and I turned to it as a form of medicine. I looked at it for literally medical marijuana, and for pain treatment. I was having a very advanced, very difficult form of sciatica. And so the sciatic nerve damage in my leg was extremely agonizing. And so I was looking for a non-narcotic source of pain relief. And I had developed this practice called modern shamanism, which is an online course that teaches how, if you're a person in the modern world, to learn and practice shamanism. And so I didn't just, after years of ayahuasca and only working with ayahuasca and the plants, just jump into use of marijuana. I took it really seriously and was, concerned that I could do something to affect or negatively affect all the work that I had done in ayahuasca. And so I really set up the space and really set it up utilizing the practices in modern shamanism to find the head medicine and the head medicine spirits of the plant and go on that initial journey. And what I found was that there was, like all of these psychoactive plants, many gateways that you could go into in cannabis, and that many of them were known, some of them were still unknown, but that the visionary space was, literally wide open, and that it really required the need of that intention of medicine, the intention of that practice for medicine, knowing what kind of spirit and energy you were trying to meet from the plant, where in the collective consciousness you were with the use of the plant. And so I immediately turned it into a shamanic practice. So it wasn't just consume this to get high. It was go into a shamanic state and seek healing in this trance that was being supported by the plant. And it was phenomenal. And I wanted to know that it was strong enough to be able to create purging. And when I was face deep in a toilet, that answered that. I knew that it could make me purge.
Without eating pizza?
Yeah, exactly. No pizza. Like literally in trance, and then all of a sudden, like, oh man, I'm going to the toilet. This is making me purge, and then purging just like ayahuasca. And when I had that connection, and knew that it had that power, I knew that we could use it for shamanism, and so I started to develop a kind of practice that we could share with others that we called cannabis shamanism, and then that took us to Colorado and the work that we were doing there, and then. We've moved now down here back to South America. So for me, during this period of time, I've suspended that practice while I've been working with ayahuasca again in San Pedro again. But I think we'll, as soon as we're in an area where we can, we'll continue to do retreats associated with it. I think it's an unbelievable medicinal plant. I think it's completely misunderstood. Just simply, I think it is completely misunderstood. The plant itself has, I think, literally nothing to do with the cultural understandings that we have in the modern world of the plant. And unfortunately, it was just not studied and understood in those ways, just like almost people don't know anything about ayahuasca. I think the difference is that it was named as a drug, and then it had, a number of decades of severe education about it in a way that only represented its negativities. And I think all medicinal plants have a positive and a negative side. And so if you just hearken on the negativity of it, you can create a really horrific story associated with it. And I think it's simple to see, where people become unmotivated, where they become antisocial, where they no longer want to be a positive element in society. That's one expression of it if you go there. But if you use it for the purpose of shamanic medicine, that is the opposite of what you find in the plant. You find an awakening, and you find a kind of relaxation you didn't have before. And it's not just in being high and then being at a party. It's on the contrary. It's a transformational effect that then makes you more relaxed in other areas when you're not using the plant. It changes you fundamentally in a way like the other medicinal plants that have this lasting effect where you have been positively transformed and affected from the experience. But I think it needs to be used ceremonially. It needs to be used in that shamanic context, in that indigenous context, and that just isn't part of the modern world's understanding of it. And so what happens is just use, not use with purpose or use with even understanding. And, that can lead anywhere.